Well, welcome to the YAHOWAH blog. I'm hoping that we get the picture-in-picture with the fellows in the scene here shortly, because thus far they're not there. So I hope Leah has them elsewhere. Well, okay, so I'm going to bring you guys up, but just give me a minute. I'm going to try to bring you up on the computer because it's not coming up on the monitor here on my desk. How are you?
We're good.
Okay.
Doing well, yeah.
That's good. Well, I can't bring you. Well, I'll try. Let's see what we've got here.
We're here. I can say you.
Right.
And
All right. So I do have you. We were hoping that this new smaller monitor that I brought in would enable us to do this show with me being able to recognize you. You're on the big screen to my far right, but unfortunately, the monitor that is showing the camera view doesn't have you cut in here as well. Anyway, we are on episode 4 of Chakmah Choter, who didn't appear very Chakmah at the beginning of this program for not having all the technology dialed in. We were talking before the show began, gentlemen, on where I made an announcement that I want to make as part of this program. And that is the deal to cut the heart out of Israel and serve it up to Islam by way of an Abraham Accord with Saudi Arabia has already been made. Now, that's a very profound statement. I have gone on record since Trump was elected in November, declaring that he would be the next Neville Chamberlain. I've said that he will be the one who claims that he has achieved peace in our time by forcing Israel to forfeit a state of terror, state of Islam, carved right out of their heart, narrowing Israel at the waist to the point that the nation is no longer defensible, and that he would do so by no later than June of 2026, 13 months from now. And I was certain of it because the prophets had written of it. We have both, Yahowah is the most prolific in this regard, but he says specifically that at the time of the Shabbat harvest, which is 7 years before the Towrah ingathering, the Yom Kippurim homecoming, and the Sukkah return to the Garden of Eden in year 6000 33 CE. So Towrah would be on the Shabbat of May 22nd, 2026. That at that time, according to Yahowah, Israel is thinned at the waist, becomes indefensible, and then a flood of what will be Muslims come into the land and wreak havoc. They are insanely damaging and murdering. And so we know the timing. And of course, Trump taking office in 2025 here, the election in 2024, him now in 2025 taking office, we recognize that he therefore will be president of the United States in 2026, which means he's the Neville Chamberlain. He's the one who sacrifices the new Czechoslovakia, which will be Israel, such that the two-state solution is imposed on them. And the reason that it has to be Trump is because Israel trusts him. Foolishly, but they do. And so because Israel trusts him, they're going to go along with this plan for promises of peace and to have a recognition from Saudi Arabia that doesn't mean anything, to recognize Israel as a Jewish state deprived of its heart, which will be given to people that Saudi Arabia could care less about. In fact, there's no Muslim country in the world that cares about these people masquerading as Palestinians. They're just malcreant and murderous Muslims. The reason I know that this has already been done, we know that it was going to be done, and I've explained why it was going to be done. I took the time, did a whole series of programs to say that what's happening here is that Trump first of all, put a person in charge who has no diplomatic experience, but is owned and operated by Trump. That's negative. And Steve Woodcock received $623 million for the private fund. And his first act was after Trump said he would release all the hostages that would be held today throughout the Middle East. And what he did is, rather than forcing any action on behalf of the Muslims, he strong-armed Netanyahu to make Netanyahu capitulate to a deal that was suicidal for Israel in the hostage exchange. And at that point, we knew that, well, he's doing exactly what we had predicted. It still wasn't clear why Trump, other than the fact he's Donald Trump, and initially I figured that he would sell Israel out because he is more covetous of the title of the ultimate deal maker, and the ultimate deal in the world has been to negotiate peace in the Middle East, and getting Saudi Arabia to recognize Israel would be acclaimed as such. He'd win a Nobel Prize. And it's almost enough that Trump would do it just for the Nobel Prize. And I stated as much. But also, Donald Trump went from having serious trouble with his businesses and bankruptcies of numbers of his properties and having to borrow money to survive, to flying around in a $100+ million jet with Trump all over the side of it, and making Mar-a-Lago look like it was just one of gazillions of Trump hangouts. And something had to happen, and we know that his son-in-law received $2 billion from Saudi Arabia. And if Kirshner received $2 billion from Saudi Arabia, how much did Donald Trump receive? The problems became worse, and it became obvious that we had a serious problem when the ceasefire that Netanyahu was forced into based upon Witkoff was such that the Qataris were praising Witkoff and saying he's the entire reason for the deal. He's strong-armed to Netanyahu. So they were getting what they paid for. And that was troublesome. And then we hear Trump say that he's going to turn Gaza into resorts, which is absolutely insane. And then we hear he's going to build emerald cities for Gazans in the Sinai and Jordan, but didn't bother to tell the Egyptians or the Jordanians that he was going to do that. And what you realize, first of all, it's a ludicrous notion, but beyond all of that, it would be worse for Israel, because now these murderous Muslims who have one thing on their mind, which is the extinction of the state of Israel and genocide perpetrated against Jews, are now going to have access to as many weapons as they want. Israel is unable to preclude the accumulation of weapons if they're not in Gaza. So it's counterproductive. But Jews were, oh, yay, move them out. Resorts in Gaza, what a wonderful idea. It just stunningly stupid. And then Trump has his meltdown with Zelensky in the White House. And Europe went berserk and said, we need a new world order. And that new world order is not going to include the United States. And China and Russia were already on the outs with the United States. And I deduced from that where we were headed was the elimination of the U.S. dollar as the foreign reserve currency, where it backs now most international trade. And that Trump, by his belligerence, had isolated the United States. And I said, I can't be frustrated with him for doing this, because the right move is to stop supplying Ukraine with weapons, so that terrible war that will lead to World War III, if it's not stopped, is ended. But of course, 3 days later, Trump demonstrated he can't be trusted and started supplying weapons again to Ukraine. Stopped negotiating directly with Russia, started blaming Russia as opposed to the Ukraine. And now he's trying to cut a deal with Russia. And he's all over the board. That means that's somebody you cannot trust. And what I'd said is that all that isolation is going to lead directly to Saudi Arabia. Then the next shoe to drop, if you will, was when the charade of a ceasefire in the Ukraine proxy war against Russia was held in Saudi Arabia, of all places. Why would you go to an uninvolved party that is run by a maniacal dictator where there is no freedom, and that's where you're going to hold your conference for a stoppage of that war? You'll only do that because he has you by the coconuts, if you will. MBS does. And part of his deal is you make me the power broker of the world. So you bring the talks here. And Trump capitulated. He brought the talks there, even though they didn't belong there and didn't even bother to bring Ukraine or Russia to the talks. It's just a charade. And then the ultimate shoe that dropped in demonstrating that I'm right here is when Trump went completely insane and held up his charts of reciprocal duties and tariffs, which none of which were accurate, and then retaliatory tariffs, and imposed tariffs on the world, which told everyone, okay, the United States is no longer a reliable party for international trade. And because they're not a reliable party, that means the U.S. dollar cannot be the world's reserve currency for international trade. And then he went totally ballistic with China to ludicrous tariffs that had zero chance of prevailing because, well, not only does China have a virtual monopoly on rare earths, 90% of the mining and production of rare earths take place in China. And without rare earths, you have no technology. He didn't bother to think that through. He didn't bother to think through that the exports to the United States for China are 2% of their GDP. A rounding error. He didn't bother to think through that the United States gets all of its computers, most of its electronics, its cell phones from China. And businesses and people need these things. And you can't put a 200% tariff on them or 150% tariff. That China is one of the largest purchasers of U.S. passenger jets. And of course, they've already canceled an order for 130 of them, which is in the many, many, many billions of dollars. And of course, what he did is he said, oh, well, China will be the first to blink. And then he eliminated the tariffs on computers, cell phones, and electronics, and
just blinking,
and will on many other things. But the very process of doing something that rash immediately put the entire world on notice. The United States dollar cannot be the reserve currency of the world. Now, why do I talk about reserve currency, fellas?
It controls everything. Without it, we got nothing. We're in debt of the union.
Yeah. Without it, the United States crumbles. And the reason for that is that we have $40 trillion of debt. Our national debt is by far the largest in the world. It's larger than probably the top 20 countries combined. And the only reason that our debt can be serviced, because no one buys U.S. bonds, and the country that bought the most of them is selling them, which has set the bond market into the tailspin when Trump announced his tariffs, is that the U.S. debt has been serviced by creating the illusion of solvency for a fiat currency by creating the illusion of money called quantitative easing. The Federal Reserve creates money out of nothing and then charges United States taxpayers interest on the money they conceived out of nothing to create the illusion that the debt is being serviced.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, without that illusion, the interest rates that would be needed to get anyone to buy treasury bills with a country that level of debt and no means to service it, that's going $2 trillion more in debt every year, would be in the 15 to 20% range. And then the debt service would triple the size of the U.S. deficit every year.
Yeah.
It's house of fire. But it's the fact that every country has to have a stockpile of dollars to do international trade based upon this reserve currency that enables the Federal Reserve to play this game of charades and smoke and mirrors. The United States gets replaced as reserve currency and it's over. They can't play that smoke and mirrors. And the United States would be bankrupt within hours because it can't service its debt. So it is now inevitable that that's going to happen. There is a way to postpone it. Now, you can't postpone it very long, but you could probably postpone it a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years out. And the person who holds the control over postponing the insolvency of the United States is Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So what did Trump announce 2 days ago? How many $100 billion, wasn't it, that he has sold of advanced U.S. weaponry to Saudi Arabia?
Wow.
$100 billion. Saudi Arabia, from their perspective, really only has one enemy. They would view that Israel as their enemy. $100 billion worth of U.S. weapons. Now, the next day, he comes out and he tells Netanyahu that they can't go bomb Iran. Oh, he says, oh, no, I really didn't say that. What I really did is made it very uncomfortable for them. What a jerk. I made it uncomfortable for them. We're talking about Israel's survival, and he has a 0% chance of negotiating a deal with Iran now that Iran already has 100% of the enriched uranium they need to build over 20 bombs. And they already have the missile technology and the missiles sitting in inventory. It does no good whatsoever to negotiate a deal with Iran at this point. None. And the only hope Israel has is that before the bombs are set on top of those missiles and put in silos distributed around the country, that they take them out militarily. And Trump said no. The next thing, on top of all of this, is that Trump comes out today and sounds like Biden. You need to get more food and medicine into Gaza. Those people are suffering. Now, he said, the Gazans all need to move out of there. He's called them horrible people. He talked about how not a single person in Gaza would even say a kind word to the hostages, and they routinely abuse them all. So he knows who they are. And now he's playing the game of, we've got to protect them. We've got to feed them. We have to nourish them. When in fact, he knows that Israel is doing more for their enemy than any country in the world's history has done for an enemy that has invaded them and perpetrated such havoc on them. But that's his new thing. We need to be kind to them. Why? Because they're going to have a state. That's why. And what did he also announce today? The certainty. He says, we are going to announce Abraham Accords with Saudi Arabia. You know why he said that? Because that deal's already done. And what does that deal require, Israel? It requires giving Saudi Arabia your heart on a silver platter. Well, on a platter lined with greenbacks. All for the promise of peace from a country where Hudabayah reigns supreme. Hudabayah in the Quran and in Islam is when Muhammad, with his goons, went down to what was Petra, called Mecca today because they moved the Kaaba. And he got cold feet because one of his extended family members came out and said, hey, the last time you were here, you were a laughing stock. We exposed you as a complete fraud. You don't want to come in here. So what we're going to cut is a deal. You're going to go away, and we'll let you visit next year under the promise that you stop terrorizing us for 10 years. You don't abduct us. You don't rape us. You don't kill us for 10 years. And Muhammad said, okay, I'll sign that deal, because he was scared to death to go back into Kabaville, around those people who he made a fool of himself. And it was called the Treaty of Hudabayah. And as he signed it, he said, a Muhammad, messenger of Allah. And they said, if we thought you were the messenger of Allah, we wouldn't have to make this deal with you. Just sign it as Muhammad. And he was willing to deny that Allah was his God or that he was the messenger of Allah just so that he wouldn't be exposed. And he came down the following year with twice as many men under arms so that he could just blow through the place, cut off heads, and conquer it without having to hear anybody. And his excuse for violating the treaty was called the Hudabayah, and it's in the 9th surah, second to last surah, revealed, and it says the treaty between a Muslim and a non-Muslim is not binding on the Muslim. That's the treaty that Israel's going to get to serve up her heart. And Trump's already negotiated. And the prophets have spoken of it, not only said it's going to happen, but between Yoel and Yashaya, they said that what's going to happen as a result of it is going to be catastrophic beyond Israel's wildest imaginations. It's the way they speak of it, it's going to be 1,000 times worse than October 7th. 1,000 times worse. Because this time, the jihadists aren't just going to come as a few thousand from Gaza. They're going to come all the way through from Egypt. They're going to come in from Jordan. They're going to come in from Saudi Arabia. They're going to come down because of the Islamic State now being empowered in Syria. From Syria, they're going to come from Turkey. They're going to come in from Lebanon. They're going to come in from the coast. And worst of all, they're going to come in from inside Israel because they're going to have their own state that Israel will not be able to do anything about in terms of minimizing the recruitment of jihadists or the collection of arms. This is your future. And all of this is going to play out before the end of 2027. It's going to be announced in 2026, and this next war will transpire in 2027. And ultimately, it will lead to world war because, well, Iran now has nuclear bombs because of the great animosity now that exists between China, Russia, Iran, and the United States. That's what's going to happen. So I just wanted to announce here on this program that Trump's already made the deal. The two-state solution is going to be imposed on Israel, and it will be imposed by May 22nd of next year. Now, so far, I've been forecasting the future as part of my role in God's plans for 23 years, fellas.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been wrong. I don't
No,
think you can name a situation where I've made a lot of specific forecasts of what's going to happen. Haven't been wrong.
A great source.
So the reason I've been right such a high percentage of the time, of course, is that I've studied the entirety of the prophets, and I've done something that is quite unique. I've made the connections between all of them to understand exactly as they portray the future events. And the destruction of the world isn't really my priority. Politics, other than to expose it and condemn it and to warn Israel about it, not my priority. Religion, other than to explain why doing a deal with an Islamic State is suicide for Israel, and negotiating with them is doing a deal with the devil. That's not the purpose. The purpose still is to explain exactly what the prophets had to say, including Dod, Yashaya, Yoel, Zechariah, is going to happen as it relates to the salvation of Israel. In this regard, we'll get back to Shal 14 just momentarily. And guys, I've sent you my translations of Zechariah 6, 7, and 8. 5, 6, 7, and 8 recently. and you'll have a chance to read those things over the next few days if you haven't already. Maybe you already have. The prophet Zechariah actually talks about how all of this will transpire, exactly how God's going to bring all the pieces together to resolve the problem of this war that is being manifest against this remnant of his people. And so we are, as we go through these programs on Chakmah Choter over the next weeks, we're in for quite the awakening to see precisely how all of these events transpire. And one of the more interesting things that you're going to learn is that everybody's familiar with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse in Revelation, right?
Yeah,
well,
right.
Where they got the idea from, because there's the same number and that speaks of horses and the same colors in Zechariah, they got the idea from Zechariah, but they got everything about them wrong. We're going to explain exactly what each of those 4 flying chariots represent. And it's, man, it is a major discovery and an eye-opener to explain what God is going to do in the end and how it's all going to play out. But that in a moment. We're still a ways. We're in the midst of trying to understand what Dode wrote about his Choter. So, fellas, this is where we ended our last program. It's Mashal Word Pictures, Proverbs 14:9. Before I go there, you guys have been with me for a long, long time. What are your thoughts about this declarative statement that it is my conclusion that Donald Trump has already made the decision and negotiated it with Saudi Arabia, with MBS, where he's headed within the next 2 months, to force Israel to give up her heart to the Fakistinians? And just one thought on that, so that you know, there is not only is there no such thing as a Palestinian or a place called Palestine, the entire purpose of the name Palestine exists to perpetrate genocide on Jews and to eliminate the state of Israel. So a Palestinian state will exist for a single purpose, and that's the extermination of the Jewish state. That's pretty harsh terms. I know saying that on X, I would go from 1,200 followers to 12, which I'll probably post on tomorrow just because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Fortunately, on Facebook, we have a much better response. But then again, on Facebook, 80% of our friends on Facebook are Jewish. So it's a very different audience on Facebook. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I don't think that even Muslims disagree with your thinking. I go back and look at old news clippings and stuff from some of the leaders of the so-called PLO in Jordan and Hezbollah and stuff, and they would say the same thing, that the Palestinians, that a Palestinian state or Palestine exists for one thing, and that is to destroy Jews. Yeah. They know they're Jordanians, they know they're Egyptians, they know they're Arabs, you know, and they would agree with you in those words that is their job, is to be a thorn in the side and to use it to destroy the state of Israel. So I don't think you have anybody pushing back on that, you know.
No, it's well, the progressives, of course, would, because they've become pimps of Islam. They view that free Palestine is somehow a liberation movement, when in fact it is the liberation of Israel from existence. Mm-hmm. But the perpetrators know what they're doing. Certainly, they know that the whole purpose of creating the myth of Palestine and Palestinian in 1968. Yes, the word existed in British nomenclature prior to then, but only because the Brits were part of Imperial Rome, mm-hmm. And in Latin, the Romans changed the name of the province of Judea in 133 when Hadrian was in the process of torturing Jews to death. Any literate Jew that was fluent in Hebrew, he wrapped scrolls of the Torah and the prophets around them, soaked them in kerosene, and then burned them alive. And while he was getting his giggles doing that, he elicited confessions as to who was the worst enemy of the Jews, and they said the Philistines. And he said, "Good, I'm going to rename the place Palestina," and that's where the name came from, and it stuck within erudite communities, particularly of elitists that thought that Latin would be a fun thing to impose. But that's the origin of it. It's hard for a fellow like me to actually say this, because if you criticize Donald Trump, you are immediately categorized as a liberal, because why would a conservative criticize Trump? And I'm actually too conservative to be a Republican. I am apolitical, but Republicans are not anywhere close to as conservative as I am.
You're also moral.
Yeah, well, it's morality is what keeps me from being political, and personal responsibility and accountability and minimal interference and maximum freedom is what keeps me from being aligned with either of the two political parties, beyond the fact that I have met so many of them and they're all egotistical jerks. Yes. Seeing that Trump was more conservative than Cackles, who was a progressive, you would have thought that we'd have been better off with with Trump than Cackles. But it's one of the things that people don't appreciate unless you're really a student of politics with an open mind. Republicans claim to be the party of fiscal responsibility, and Democrats are the big spending party. But because everybody knows that Democrats would prefer to spend and create a bigger government, and Republicans would rather be more fiscally responsible, you know what actually happens during a Republican versus a Democratic administration?
Go to war.
Well, the Democrats are more prone to start wars, and the Republicans are more prone to end wars. When it comes to deficit spending, when a Republican is in the White House, deficit spending increases more rapidly, and it does exactly the opposite when there is a liberal in the White House. And the reason for that is it's very difficult for a person who is suspected of big spending to be a big spender. Well, the people are more receptive to the idea of a person who claims to be fiscally conservative to propose, like Trump did, his $4 billion COVID plan. They say, well, it's okay, it's Trump. I mean, how bad could it be? He's a conservative. Right. Well, the same thing is going to apply to Israel. They think that he is their protector, and he is the guy that is going to make them so vulnerable that they can't defend themselves. And don't think for a moment that Israel's IDF is in a position to defend Israel. They're just not. And I say this because, October 7th proved that the IDF is wholly incapable of understanding Islamic planning. They seem to be great at understanding what Syria wants to do, no longer because now it's Islamic terrorists, but they understand what Jordan and Egypt and Saudi Arabia are thinking. They seem to have good intelligence in that regard, and they have the weapons to deal with an army. So if Turkey were to fly their airplanes and their ships and that sort of thing in a military war, they'll win the 6-Day War again. They would win the Yom Kippur War again, a war against armies. But when it came to a war against jihadists on foot and on motor scooters, they lost badly, overwhelmingly. And in fact, for 12 hours, they didn't even participate. Yeah. They didn't anticipate it. They didn't participate. And Israel, rather than investing in a means to better understand the motives of Muslims and to stop them, and to buy the kinds of deterrents that would be appropriate in every community in Israel. For example, arming every Israeli. For example, having a distributed IDF that exists primarily to defend Israeli communities from foot soldiers that are Islamic jihadists.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're still buying F-15s and F-35s and tanks and submarines and things that have absolutely no use. And the next October 7th. They always say that armies are best suited to fight the prior war. Well, in this case, the IDF is not. They didn't learn. And so Israel will have no defenses for what Trump's going to perpetrate on them. I wish it was not true. My job would be so much easier if it were not true. But it is true.
I don't even know that arming Israeli citizens is the answer, because you have 30% of them that are very liberal, and yes, Muslims come in and work in our communities, and why can't we all get along? Those are not pull a trigger gun people. And then you have the other 30% that are Haredi. You might be able to arm a million, 2 million, and that's a good start. But
a little more. It's a little more than that, because it's about 20% that are progressives. And not all progressives are. Well, they're all misguided. Yeah. You'd have to say that half of progressives are still willing to defend their country.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's probably 20% of progressives, and half of them would still be willing to defend their country. That's 10% you have to take out of the 7.5 million Jews in Israel. Then on the Haredim, there's 20% of Israelis that are Haredim. The Haredim are completely and universally worthless. They're parasites. They're worse than worthless. They're not a net zero. They're a net minus 10. But it's 20% of them that are completely. In fact, you almost wish they would go to the enemy, because they'd be a burden for the enemy.
Sure.
Okay, so that's 30% that you'd have to take out of 7 million that can't defend themselves. But when it comes to Israelis, by the time they're 10, they're ready to fight. And just because they're 80 doesn't take the fight out of them.
Yeah.
And this is a country where you can't discount women. They will kick your ass if challenged. I mean, they are devoted. They're strong. And so there is 80% or 70% of Israelis, and you'd have to then take out 20% for too old and too young of that amount, and now you're at 50% of Israelis. That's still 3.5 million to 3.6 million Israelis that could be armed and could have defensive structures in place that would preclude 100 or 1,000 times October 7th. But it would be a completely different mindset than the current Israeli mindset. It would be literally a people's army, and not fighting in Gaza. There to defend Israel.
Can I add something that I had a guy that worked for me who was a very, very famous soldier. He started out at 17 years old in Korea, and they fought that huge battle against 300,000 Chinese. And he said half of them that came down in the first waves didn't even have a gun. They just had a fake walking gun.
Yeah.
And they got defeated, and the Americans got defeated, and they had to run away. And he said the problem was they ran out of bullets.
Yep.
The gun gets so hot, red hot, they had poured everything they could, including bodily fluids, on top of the gun to cool them down so they could fire them again. You can't win against 40, 50,000 people coming down the hill when you got 10, much less millions.
Millions.
No, you can't. If you had flamethrowers, it's the only thing I can think of temporarily.
And I don't know. The great jihad, right? The great jihad, and what you've just described, is exactly what the prophets say. And that's why I have written so many times, there are going to be more jihadists flooding into Israel in 2027 than Israel has bullets.
Yeah. And they'll want to die.
Yeah, they want to die. Yeah, they want. Allah says there's only two types of Muslims in the Quran. He says this in the 8th surah. There are Muslims who have already honored their vow to Allah and have died killing for Allah. And there are Muslims who are waiting for the opportunity to honor their promise to die killing for Allah.
What a culture.
So that is where we are, and that will be the last jihad. So it's the fact that they're coming from all around Israel is one thing, and in greater numbers, some 1,000-fold, and that the fact that the IDF hasn't learned their lesson. They don't know how to fight that kind of war. And then you add to that at least 2 million of them, probably closer to 3 or 4 million of them, are going to come from right inside of Israel, where Israel's only going to be about 5 miles wide at its heart, which is what the prophets say, which is where 70% of Israelis live. 70% of Israelis are going to be within 2 miles one direction or another of this army of jihadists. Now, if you're Jewish and you're listening to this program, we hope you are. We're not saying this because we want it to happen. We are not by any means saying this. No one knows more about the religion of Islam than I do, having written the 5 books of goddamn religion. I know the religion better than anyone. I've received thousands of death threats based upon having written it. So I know who they are. I know how they think. I know what the Quran says. I know what Muhammad did. I understand that Israel's at war with religion. And I know what the prophets have said. And therefore, I know what's going to happen. And it is my job to tell you what's going to happen. And I'm here to tell you that there is an alternative for you. And that alternative is presented right here in the Mashal word pictures, Proverbs 14, where Dod, the actual Messiah, your Savior, your King, the very Son of God, the ultimate prophet, the exemplar of the people, the embodiment of all that is Israel, he has told you about the alternative. And the alternative is to listen to his Choter so you don't end up in that carnage. So that you're part of the Shabbat harvest, so that you're part of the Towrah ingathering, so that you're part of those that Yahweh collects and he brings into Jerusalem for the sacrifice of the red heifer. You don't have to lose. You can win. There is, and many Israelites will prevail. So I'm just telling you what's going to happen. It's not God's making this happen. It's Israel. You've done this to yourself. I mean, you created Islam. And don't think for a second you didn't. I've proven it in goddamn religion based upon what the Quran and Hadith say. And in this, they are correct. That rabbis sold Talmud stories to Muhammad. It's obvious. He twisted them to serve his interest. When he claimed they came from Allah, the rabbis who sold him those Talmud stories mocked him. And the only way that a psychopath deals with that situation, where they were proving that he was a fraud, is they perpetrated genocide on all Jews in Arabia. And that is why the Quran turned into such an anti-Semitic tone. So you put yourself in this position, and all the while, you have erased Yahweh's name, and you've denied your Messiah. Oh, you claim, we're waiting for the Messiah. David, we've got his star. No, David didn't have a star. It was the false Messiah that had the star. Bar Chakmah, son of a star. And you don't acknowledge Dod as your savior. You don't acknowledge that he was the man that fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim. You don't even acknowledge Matzah Bikurim. You miscast Passover. You don't associate him with it. You don't refer to him as your Messiah. You don't refer to him as the Son of God. You don't even refer to him as a prophet. You don't refer to him as the returning king. And it's all there. In fact, it's irrefutable how clear that God's made all of that for you. So that's where we are, fellas. And Israel, what God says of you is that you become so religious for so long and so political for so long, and therefore so far estranged from him that he said he could find no one with whom to speak through, no one to communicate through. You told him you didn't ever want to hear him directly again. And so you precluded him from speaking to you or through a Yahud to you. And he just said, you've given me no other choice. I'm going back to heaven. I am going to, though, resolve this in the end, because I'm going to send someone, it happens to be this Choter, to awaken you. And even then, you're going to stay recalcitrant and rebellious, embittered, continue to erase my name, continue to pretend that you have a relationship with Hashem and a G-D, and that you're Torah observant when you're playing around with your Talmud, until there is no other choice. When you finally come to realize the rabbis were lying to you and they can't protect you. When you finally come to realize your politicians were lying to you and they can't protect you. When you finally realize that your IDF is ill-prepared for what's coming. Only then are you going to start listening. Only then. And so in a way, this horror that I spoke to you about as we began this program is actually a salvation for a remnant, because without it, you would never return to God. With it, some of you will. So that's where we are. Okay, so returning to what Dode said in the last passage we were reading. Did I take up the entire first hour, fellas, of our family hour?
Okay.
Oh, I guess I'm 10 minutes. Yeah, 15 minutes shy of that. I can't help it. I love Israel, and I want you so badly to listen and return back to Yahowah. He's there for you. He's lovable. He is approachable. He's kind. He's generous. He's going to welcome you back with open arms. All you have to do is stop erasing his name. Stop denying Dode as his son and your savior. Start appreciating the actual purpose of each of those 7 Moed Mikre, and appreciate and acknowledge the 5 terms and conditions of the covenant. It's not a lot to ask. Beguiled and corrupted by leadership are those who are incapable of thinking judiciously. No one exercises good judgment today. The simple-minded, without overall understanding, mock in a derisive, arrogant, and scornful fashion. Whew. Boy, isn't that the truth. Constantly boasting in their disrespect for the compensation provided to remove guilt by way of the atoning sacrifice. I may have said that so quietly that it didn't come through on the mic, but it's hard for me to say it. So, gentlemen, why can't I even say that without choking up? The first part is easy. Beguiled by their leadership. Those people now are incapable of thinking judiciously, of exercising good judgment. The simple-minded lack understanding. They mock, they're derisive, they're arrogant, they're scornful. They boast in their disrespect. You can say that, no problem. It's what follows that I
a little personal, huh?
Well, it is. That really wasn't where I was going. Yes, I will be. Well, for this group, I guess it is personal. I didn't even think of that. It is personal. For this group, I am that sacrifice. It's true. I am the Adam of Parah. I am the red heifer. I will be sacrificed on Towrah. And one of the things you're going to learn, guys, if you haven't read it already, is that the purpose of that white chariot is between sunrise and sunset on the Shabbat of Towrah, the day of the herald, September 24th of 2033, year 6000 Yah. Yahweh's going to pick up every eligible Jew from around the world and bring them to Jerusalem. Everyone. And it's so that they can benefit from this sacrifice to remove their guilt of the red heifer, preparing the adulterous woman to be betrothed to Dode. I didn't even think of it that way.
Well,
I'm thinking of it. No, I wasn't. I mean, okay, yes, I'm going to be making that sacrifice. And yes, I am disrespected by Israel. I wouldn't choke me up. I think of it as the most important person in the history of the world, the man who wrote these words.
Mm-hmm.
He fulfilled Passover as the Passover lamb. He allowed the Romans to rip the skin off of his flesh. He allowed them to nail his body to a crucifixion state. He wrote about it in first person 1,000 years before he endured it in very specific detail. And then he volunteered to carry our guilt into Sheol, to deposit it there on Matzah, never to be seen again. And his people denied him. They disrespected him, even though he did these things. That's how I read it. So I read Dode saying, "You idiots, beguiled by rabbis and your politicians. You go around and you mock me, you're derisive, you're arrogant, you're scornful, you're unthinking. Here I told you exactly what I was going to do, right to the most important specific details. I even told you when I was going to arrive to fulfill these events in year 33 CE, 4000 Yah, and I did it. I did exactly what I said I was going to do, and you denied me. I paid the compensation to remove your guilt, and yet there's not one in a million of you that acknowledges what I have done for you." That's how I read it. That's why I get choked up. It is true, so I cannot criticize your conclusions, fellas, that Dode and I are alike in a number of ways, and one of the ways that we're alike is we're the two guys that are giving up their physical bodies to fulfill one of the Moed Mikre, Dode with Pesach, me with Towrah. And both have exactly the same benefit. Well, not quite. Pesach opens the doorway to life. It was matzah when Dode took our guilt away, and that was much more difficult than anything I'm going to do. He had to carry it into Sheol. But in terms of our bodies being bludgeoned, that's the same, to fulfill a Moed Mikre. And it's what Yahweh's doing with our sacrifice, being able to work through us to accomplish it, that is so magnificent for his people, and yet they deny it. Alternatively, those who are right and on the level and straightforward, Yashar, those who are upright, correct, not bowed down, not beating their heads against a rock wall, who are in accord with the proper standard, not the Talmud, but the actual Torah of Moshe and its guidance and direction, observe the connections between things, and they come to understand Bien. Bien is the operative term of the third of seven spirits that of the Ruach that are given to the Choter. Bien is listed third. The first is the spirit of Yahweh. The second is the spirit of Chakmah, which we've heard so many times in this Mizmor. And the third is the spirit of Bien, understanding. It is essential, if you're going to convey Yahweh's message as he intended it and show the entire portrait of everything that God presented from beginning to end. I guess that's why the next spirit is exactly that. It's the spirit of providing advice and counsel about the entire story from inception to conclusion. Our expulsion from Eden to our readmittance. And he is this individual who has Bien, is therefore able to understand and observe the connections between these very choices that lead to being approved and accepted. If you want to be approved and accepted and make the Towrah harvest, or which is an ingathering of olives, or the Shabbat, which comes before it, 7 years prior to it, of standing grain, then you need to understand what Dowd has done. If you want to be one of those that is purified by the sacrifice of the red heifer on Towrah, then you're going to need to understand what I've shared with you and will continue to share with you about that particular sacrifice as it is explained in the Torah and in the prophets. So the understanding is, and it's the understanding of the atoning sacrifice that Dowd has made, I guess it's true that I will make, that enable the person who pays attention to what we say to capitalize and therefore be approved and accepted by God.
Yeah.
I would say that's a big deal. So you should only listen if you want your soul to survive.
Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise, you have no reason to listen. It is a sign of the times, with far too few thinking judiciously today. The human condition has degraded to the extent that evidence and reason no longer resonate with the overtly political and religious, and indeed with an entire generation or two of young people in the West. And they've never resonated with Muslims or with just any overtly religious person. Their faith makes them immune to reason. So those that are spewing the most rotten trash are even arrogant now in their offensive ignorance. Boy, do I see that all the time on X. And X is the marketplace of ideas for the world. It speaks poorly of the world. These days, much of my message, of course, focuses on what Dowd has done to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakorim, and will do on Towrah upon his return. And it's all set alongside what I've been asked to achieve in coordinating the Shabbat and Towrah in gatherings, and to make the homecoming as joyous and extravagant, as celebratory as possible, as the Anima Parah on this sunrise of Towrah. And within this context, both of us are providing atoning sacrifices, the author of this Mizmor and the subject of it as the Choter, offering compensation to purge the guilt of God's people. So it's pretty extraordinary to have the man who knew that he was going to fulfill Pesach and Matzah as the Passover lamb write about the man who was going to fulfill the Day of the Herald as the productive bull, doing one 1,000 years before he would endure it and the other 3,000 years before I would endure it. He wrote about what I was going to do almost 3,000 years before I was born.
Wow.
It's pretty extraordinary, really, isn't it?
I guess.
I will tell you that sometimes this whole idea of time and how Yahowah is able to take the souls of those that he likes to work with forward and back and time, because as a spiritual being, time simply exists. It's a medium that you can navigate through, just as we navigate up, down, right, left, back, and forth. Time is a dimension, and as a spiritual being, you can navigate it. And so Yahowah takes his prophets forward in time to see future events, and then back in time to report on what they have seen. But there also appears to be, particularly surrounding Dowd, this interaction of people not yet born. And when we listen to that Malach, that spiritual messenger that is speaking with Zechariah, and he's expressing emotion with Zechariah. He's doing things that never otherwise appear, and a voice to a prophet says, "Why don't you understand this? I've just explained it. Why don't you get it?" It's exactly the same as Michael when he's around Gabriel, who is Dode, God's most courageous and capable man, and Michael is the one who knows the truth about God. It's like the way that he goes about explaining what Dode said to Daniel so that Daniel gets it. And he said, what's wrong with you? He explained the whole thing. Why don't you understand? Well, that's exactly the same thing as this Malak, that spiritual messenger that is trying to get Zechariah's attention. Other than, to be fair, Zechariah's a whole lot brighter and a whole lot better read and a whole lot better man than was Daniel. But and there's times when he gets exasperated, and there's times when he shows great emotion, and you realize this is no Malak. This is a spiritual messenger, all right. It's a man filled with the Spirit, and you're saying, wait a minute, I don't remember doing that. But
I don't remember doing that yet.
I don't remember doing that yet.
Very good.
Boy, it's really weird. And I've gotten a flavor for it here recently, because the day that Yahweh disclosed to me through the prophet Yashayah and then through Moshe that I was that Adamah Parah, and that I would be sacrificed on behalf of Yisrael on Towrah, he showed the whole thing to me. I mean, it took me forward in time. I saw the entire event. That's why I know that there would be no Dome of the Rock or Alaska Mosque on the Temple Mount. I knew exactly where on the Temple Mount it was going to take place, and what would be there. This replica of the tent of the restoring witness would be there. I've seen the whole thing. And so I now have a sense for what it's like to go forward in time and then to come back. Mm-hmm. But this is an amazing experience when the man that you're committed to serving. Understand here that just because Dode wrote of the Choter, of which I'm the only candidate in the history of the world for this particular role, and I've got every criterion to an amazing extent of what is spoken of this individual. Pardon?
That's not debatable.
No, it really isn't.
You're right.
Yeah.
We crossed that river a long time ago.
Crossed that a long time ago, and every time when I went in and tried to study the four flying chariots of Zechariah 5, or Zechariah 6, I think. Zechariah 6 is the flying chariots. One of the 5 or 6. It's been doing this now from sunrise to sunset, and the addresses get a little blurry. But to go through something that no one's ever understood and has been wrong about, and go through it and say, oh, that's what this is. And some of these things are so subtle, you'd say, how in the world did that come to you? There's just something that goes along with this job that you flat out get it. And then you realize that if you didn't get it, that none of this could happen. They could not have seen a successful homecoming of Dode and Yahowah without what they have achieved through the Choter. So that's why they speak so much about the Choter, is not just so the Choter knows what to do, because he screws up, it's really bad, but also, but although God does have a failsafe, I learned that God does, boy, is that big relief to me. He has a failsafe.
Einstein said God does not play dice.
He does not play dice. He is, well, he is all in with what we're doing. He does have a failsafe. That is the purpose of that white chariot. The white chariot is the failsafe. Now, the fact of the matter is, while I'm perceiving it as a failsafe, Yahowah presents it not as a failsafe. He just says, I made a promise that beyond all of the children of Israel, who were the surviving remnant in Israel, prepared to benefit from the sacrifice of the red heifer, that in addition to that, Yahowah, what did he say? So I'm going to, and he even said this in Yashayah, where we learned about the sacrifice of the red heifer, on Towrah. He says, the next thing he went and says, I'm going to withdraw my people from all these places and bring them home.
Yeah.
That's what the purpose of the white chariot is. And it all happens in the 12 hours between sunrise and sunset on Towrah. And so the fail-safe is, should Elia and I do a crappy job of convincing the Israelis that they need to listen to Yahweh and accept Dod as their as their Messiah and returning king, Yahweh's going to ride around the world and bring in every Jew that isn't overtly religious and political who has a chance of benefiting from this. So he is stacking the deck in our favor and doesn't feel safe.
I like him. I like his plan.
Yeah, I like his plan. What it says to me is, yeah, if I were to screw up, he has a plan. But I don't think the plan even works unless we do reasonably well. So we're going to continue to do reasonably well. Anyway, one of the great joys, fellas, that I've experienced beyond knowing that Yahweh does have a fail-safe in case I screw up, which is really, really reassuring to me. Knowing how much is at stake and what my qualifications are, it is particularly reassuring. But one of the great joys I've had is watching Yahweh assemble his alternative to the beguiled with a level of competency and support that is as endearing as it is uplifting. Do you know that one of the things, in fact, he says it twice. So I guess this is an attaboy, so that I wouldn't feel bad about the fact that God has a failsafe. He says that those who are gathered via these white this white flying chariot,
yes,
they're going to be there because of Yada Yah.
Wow. So they read it at some point, or they heard it at some point.
Yeah, he said it twice.
Wow. Good.
He said they're going to be there because of Yada Yah, and they're coming for the benefit of Dod, and he tells us that in no uncertain terms. So the benefit is for Dod, but if it were not for Yada Yah, they wouldn't be there.
Well done.
So that was, as I told Leah once I went through that, I said, I think I've just translated my new absolute favorite passage to get an acknowledgement, an attaboy. Okay, yeah, I do have a fail-safe, but hey, kid, you're doing okay. Yeah, it brought tears to my eyes. Anyway, we do have a new formidable team, and you guys know we are now a formidable team. We are making tremendous progress. Our progress is straightforward. We're on the level. We're guided by his instructions. We've already updated the old website to the new look. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Leah, for doing so. And we are really, really close now. I get to see the progress on a daily basis to an entirely different approach to our website, one that is almost all interactive, and it's really marvelous what they're putting together. And I'm excited with what we've done with the Yahowah blog. I mean, it's amazing what you can do with unskilled talent. You take a guy that had never ever posted a single word in social media in his life.
Hated it with a passion.
And at this point, he is just a month or so away from being 70 years old. And you realize that social media, and particularly video blogging, is the passion of 25-year-olds broadcasting out of mom's basement. That to go from
your basement.
Not even having a camera that was within the last 30 years to now, we've got 3 studios set up, 5 or 6 of the most outstanding cameras you can buy for this, hundreds of lights and state-of-the-art microphones, and we have switches and monitors, and oh my goodness, I mean, teleprompters, you name it. We are broadcasters, and doing so in a way that I think is actually more credible. And everything is a live stream. We just turn on the lights and start the camera, and here we are. And I think that it was December 15th that Yahowah said, I want you to start the Yahowah blog. And at that point, I bought $50,000 worth of electronics. I mean, it's it's like 8 very high-tech computers just to facilitate all of this, and an entirely new network to stream it all, just for the backbone of it. And I live on an island where bringing in at that time of year, it's a month task just to get the gear, and then you got to learn how to use it. So from this is what I want you to do to figuring out what to buy, buying it all, getting it here, integrating, getting it set up, being able to do this.
We're doing good, I think.
Well, I think we're doing okay, man. We've got well over 200 hours of YAHOWah blog, and it's beautifully presented on YouTube, 4 YouTube channels, guys. Charles, Stephen, thank you for what you do for us there, and Kevin, and all your shorts, which are essential to this, and all the work that you do with Leah on graphics. Thank you for that. Leah's been up 3 o'clock in the morning last night working with Joe on the new website. We had Rich here, and he is our technology maven. He's been here now twice, coming back to live full time just to help get the word out to Israel. People devoting their entire lives to you. And Kirk, we've done this now and for better part of 15, 16 years. And you are Mr. Analog in a digital world, and yet there you are, video blogging away.
Yeah, I know. It's remarkable, isn't it?
Isn't it remarkable?
It is funny how if you just get started, whatever it is that you're doing that is about what Yah wants done, if you just get started, it's funny that how stuff just moves out of your way. It happens. I tell folks that want to help all the time, well, what do? I say, just start. Whatever you're going to do, just start, and you'll be amazed at how fast things just get out of your way. Yeah. There
was a young lady today that I heard her name for the first time. She heard me on one of the audio programs when she was 7 years old, which was 13 years ago. Wow. And she was smart enough at 7 years old to say, I trust that guy. I'm going to do as he recommended. She became covenant, 7 years of age, and she has continued to grow. Now, her father's a really bright man. I remember the letters her father wrote. His father is an engineer, aerospace engineer, I believe. And her father actually challenged some of my conclusions in terms of dimensionality and that sort of thing, but very respectfully. And Wookie is trying to jump. He just about did a crash and burn. He knocked over one of the little lights. So she comes from good parents. But 21 years old now. She contacted Leah a week ago and said, I want to help out. And I sent the letter on to Leah, and she says, all right, we'll do some graphics together. And the most recent song we posted on Facebook and the others, and today she did the graphics for. Yeah, she did the graphics. Wow. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Just start, right? She knew nothing about Canva, which was the tool to use it. And yes, Leah had to help her out considerably in the first process, but she did it. Mm-hmm. And the answer is you just show up. Put me in the game, coach. I'm ready to play. Yeah, that's and by the way, that is the identifying trait of covenant. The reason that those who gave us lip service to the covenant and actually did some good things for a while and then bailed are no longer part of it, and that is a new team that is, and of course, a huge percentage of the original covenant is still here, but is you gotta stay active. Mm-hmm. Yahowah wants us to work with him. He wants us to be a family that contributes and constantly recognizes what's at stake. Yeah. The lives and souls and the very existence of Israel, the lives and souls of Jews, their recognition that Yahweh is God, their recognition of everything that Dode as their Savior has done. This is really, really important stuff. And with just 8.5 years left, it's important that we all contribute. And continuing to contribute turns out to be the determining factor if you stay covenant. You can't say, I'm going to accept the conditions and then be a couch potato or worse. And boys, there's need for involvement everywhere. So what follows is really quite profound. And it says as follows. Sets the Choter apart from all but a handful of people, at least in Dod's eyes. So of Yada, our king declares, the locus of judgment and the inclination, motivation, and inspiration, even the emotion and disposition of Yada, is cognizant of, concerned about, and acknowledges the conscious capacity of his soul to observe and to respond to mora. Oh, the bitterness and hostility, the resentment and acrimony, the rebellion and defiance, as well as experiencing genuine jubilation as a result of him overcoming adversity. He is largely alone, never influenced by others, while avoiding any association with the pledges and vows of those who are illegitimate, who are unauthorized, disallowed and wrong, estranged. Mashal Word Pictures 14:10. Let's just take this from the beginning, and because this is quite a statement. So he begins with Leb. And the first thing we have to understand with Leb is that when used in an ancient language, particularly in Hebrew, Leb did not mean heart. It spoke of one's judgment. It spoke of your consciousness, of your ability to make character-based decisions. So it's your disposition, it's your attitude, it's your motivation, it's your inspiration, it's your sense of right and wrong, is what Leb meant in Hebrew. So the locus of his judgment. And as Leah would know, and Kirk, you've been with me for a while, your wife in particular is one of those who recognizes this. I'm judgmental as hell.
Yeah.
And I will look at something, I'll say right, wrong, good, bad, just immediately. I'm not here to pussyfoot around.
Don't have time.
Don't have time, and do not have time. So very judgmental. The locus of his judgment, inclination, motivation, and inspiration, even his disposition. Of Yada. 20 years ago, when I started translating the Torah and Prophets, maybe 22 years ago now, after the experience in Prophet of Doom, which became Goddamn Religion, I worked under a pen name for 10 years. 10 years, I was the happiest translator in the world as an anonymous Yada, and I never I never told anybody.
That hit you pretty good, huh?
Yeah. I was willing to expose Islam under my real name because I thought what it shows is a sense of confidence that I'm doing this on God's instruction, because no one has ever exposed Islam under the real name and it survived it. So I thought, that's what YAHOWAH wants me to do. And now, when we said to switch to the YAHOWAH blog, YAHOWAH was very insistent that this is going to be under both of our names. Me speaking for him. But when I was translating YAHOWAH's Torah, I was much more comfortable being anonymous, being the guy that's, I'm going to tell you what the words say, and I'm going to share what conclusions you can deduce from them. But I'm going to be an anonymous tour guide, and wrote everything as Yada. That was my pen name, and never moved out of character. Even doing the audio programs, I was Yada. Never Craig, ever. I was happy that way. And now I'm being acknowledged as Yada. And I always thought the Yada stood for one who knows, recognizes, is familiar with, and understands Yahweh. But that's not how Yahweh came up with the name. And he came up with the name for me 3,000 years before I chose it. And the way that Yahweh uses it is this person has overall understanding. This person has a wide base of knowledge. This person, therefore, is cognizant of and is aware of, is familiar of who I am and what I'm offering, and is willing to acknowledge that. That's how he uses Yada. And then he speaks of nephesh. Nephesh is the conscious capacity of a soul to observe and respond. And this is now Yada's soul. The reason that it is not difficult for Yahweh to have someone like Elia live two lives, and everybody knows that Elia is going to live two lives, right? He was he was the most articulate orator in the history of Israel against religion and politics. And Yahweh took him, and he's bringing him back because Elia is one of the two witnesses. So nobody has any problem with this nephesh soul of Elia being put into a physical body to serve as a physical witness in the last 3.5 years. Right?
Right.
Everybody's comfortable with that.
Yes.
And Twistians would even be comfortable with their myth coming back for a second time, maybe a third time, since he was dead and buried and took a nap and then was resurrected like Dionysus. They wouldn't have a problem with that. But Yahweh says over and over and over again that he's bringing Dod back. He's got a seat of honor for him, a throne, a house that he's built for him, that Dod becomes the king of not only forevermore, but of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean Dod would have to come back. And the only way for Dod to come back is his nephesh would have to come back. But yet there are hundreds and hundreds of prophecies that speak of Dod fulfilling, even writes in first person, Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim, and he himself said that he was going to come in 33 CE, giving us the exact date.
Yes.
So that means Dod has 3 lives. And because this nephesh soul is something that Yahweh created, and it's the part of us that matters, Yahweh can take our nephesh soul, bring it to Shamayim, bring it forward in time, bring it back in time, and because he also invented DNA, if he wants to take Dod's nephesh soul and 1,000 years later put it in another Bashar corporeal body, he writes a little DNA recipe and voila, there you have a physical body.
Don't farmers do that in a cologne?
Simple, straightforward, easy for Yahweh to do with DNA. And he's going to do it with Dod not once, but twice.
Yeah.
And he said he was going to do it. So I don't know why it's so difficult for people to understand that Dod is not going to have just 2 lives, but 3 lives. And clearly, according to Yahweh, he says it 3 times, Dod is the Messiah. Clearly, Yahweh said it 3 times, Dod is the Son of God. Clearly, Dod is the prior king and the returning king. God said it over and over again. Clearly, Dod is returning. So why is no one willing to give Dod credit for the second of his 3 lives, which is the one that Dod spoke the most about? What do you think the entire 22nd Mizmor is? What do you think Yeshayah 53 is talking about? What do you think is the subject of the first 30 Psalms?
Yeah.
They're all the same thing. Yeah. So with a nephesh soul, Yahweh is capable of taking a person that he likes to work with for whatever personality, uniqueness, in this case, the leb, the person's judgment, their disposition, their inclinations, their attitude is the thing that is the single most important thing to Yahweh. He can take those people and bring them forward in time and can project them as he wants to. And he does. And so it is Yada's conscious capacity to observe and respond to something that is critical. Now, Moria, fellas, is something that is fairly unique to my message. I've heard a lot of people talk about the Torah, and they want to present Jews as the people of the Torah and this great story of liberation from slavery in Egypt and how wonderful they were, that they are God's chosen people. Correct?
Yeah.
That's
How many people have you heard openly declare and say it over and over again that the children of Israel were shits, that they were absolutely obnoxious, that they were embittered, that they resented Yahweh, they were displayed all manner of acrimony, they were rebellious, they were defiant, they were insubordinate, they were recalcitrant? Have any more words that we could throw out?
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, yes.
And that they began before they even crossed the Red Sea to enter into.
Barely got out of town.
Yeah, they barely got out of town. They're saying, we want to go back. Why'd you take us out here to kill us? We want to go back. And they didn't even get to Choreb, and they're starting to build a goddamn religious idol. And Aaron is one of the people building it. And then they have the worst of the meltdowns is Moriah, the waters of Meribah, based upon Moriah. But there's something else here. And this is why this whole episode with Yahweh is such an out-of-body experience. Because when I asked Yahweh, so what do I do with this rebellion that we're having? It's pretty embittered and a lot of resentment here, great hostility. They're saying awful things about me and even worse things about my wife. What do I do with this? How do you want me to address it? And he says, I've already answered that question for you, young man. Said, didn't you just write a whole lot on how Numbers 19 leads to Numbers 5 and how the Adam of Parah cures the adulterous woman? No, yeah, I did that. That was a great story. Thanks very much for allowing me to kill myself. Well, to be killed, not kill myself. Yeah, no, I didn't. I don't. When Yah was talking to me, I want to tell you, I do a lot of listening and not a lot of talking.
Thank you.
But yes, I get it. It says, what's in between? Okay, that would be Numbers 12. Like I said, I told you how to respond. The name of the woman who is embittered, that besmirches Moshe's wife as this woman of the mother goddess cult did to my wife, and then claimed that she too spoke for God. What is that woman's name?
Miriam.
What is the basis of Miriam?
Moriah.
Moriah.
Okay. Yeah.
Miriam means embittered, hostile, resentful, acrimonious, rebellious, defiant, insubordinate, recalcitrant. And so here now is the king of the Choter. And he's writing about the Choter and says, okay, the Choter's he's reasonably bright. He's got a sound locus of judgment. Yada's cognizant of what his conscious capacity can observe and respond to. And he asked Yahweh, where do I go to tell how I'm supposed to deal with this challenge, which at this late date was a serious problem. I mean, publisher goes, my webmaster goes, and the social media person goes. When I've got just over a year left to conduct the Shabbat harvest, that's a serious, and they're disparaging me. That's a fairly serious rebellion and hostility and acrimony. And so I'm saying, I'm sure you got a plan for this. So what are we going to do? And it's the answer is Moriah. And here's Dode now he's introducing the whole concept of the Choter and what the Choter is supposed to accomplish. And he says, oh, by the way, he knows how to respond to Moriah. And you go, okay. How come I didn't know? Well, of course I didn't notice that before, because I didn't know that we're going to have this rebellion, or that it would be exactly, it is precisely what happened in the story of the meltdown of Miriam and Aaron. when they said, "We too speak for God." God, by the way, did not agree with them. That said, no, that's not. That is not true. And oh, by the way, even if your father had spit in your face, showing his repugnance of you, I would still send you off, divorce myself of you, and plague you with leprosy. And he did. It is not good to claim to speak for God. It's like, we talked about God's asking everybody who's covenant to participate. My job is to speak for Yahweh, to be the voice of Yahweh. The job of everybody else is to support that effort so we can reach the maximum number of qualified individuals, both Goyim and Yehudim worldwide. That is our job. Just like during the Exodus, it was Moshe's job to speak for Yahweh and everybody else's job to rally around and support him, not to pick at him and annoy him and do everything else they did.
Right.
That's the way Yahweh works.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to tell you, I'm not being the least bit egotistical here because I prefer to be anonymous. The job that Kevin, you're really super devoted, as you are, Kirk, to our mission, and so is my wife. You don't want to change. You don't want. It'd be crazy to want to change roles.
Well, I guarantee you I don't.
I mean,
I don't get up to 7.
Yeah, yeah, and it's every day, 7 days a week, 12 to 14 hours a day, and has been for 24 years.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of all of that, you realize that if you too screw up, you've lost the planet. You lost the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really bad. And so, nobody wants. Complaining. I've come to settle in, and I love working with Yahweh. He is so supportive, so much fun, so entertaining. So I love the job, and I love learning, and I like being in a position where we know the truth, and I like the challenge of trying to do something, well, even God couldn't do. Just get the attention of his people. Now, we are working as a team to accomplish that, and we will prevail, but it's going to take a lot to get through to this group that is so acrimonious. Now, you might say, okay, well, that's making too big a deal of a single rebellion, even if it was at the 11th hour, and if it were the top 3 people that were contributing to disseminating the message.
No, it's not.
Well, I would even get you credit and say, okay, let's just pretend it is. How would Yahweh describe Yisrael?
They don't like him.
Would Moriah come to mind?
Yeah. Pretty much. Yeah.
When is Israel been, other than Moriah, embittered, hostile, resentful, acrimonious, rebellious, and defiant?
Indulged in a touch of Hezekiah.
Yeah, for a few weeks under Hezekiah.
Yeah.
And what did it take? It took 185,000 Assyrians to come with. I mean, 185,000. There were 3,000 to 4,000 Islamic jihadists that infiltrated on October 7th. Talk about, and they were on motor scooters and sneakers. Some even carrying garden tools. And you're talking about the best trained army in the world, and they're hanging outside of your city, and there's 185,000 of them. That's what it took to say, all right, we'll try it your way. So that's what it's going to take for Israel to, okay, we'll try it your way, Yahweh. But there is no indication other than briefly under Dode, and they were rebellious also under Dode. And they were certainly rebellious under Moshe. And, from Abraham to Yishak to Jacob to the 12 sons, man, they were a rebellious lot too.
And Yahshua had nobody.
Yahshua had nobody for millennia.
Mm-hmm.
So Moriah is how he would describe Israel. And so what he's saying is, you know how to respond to Israel. You know how to respond to this embittered hostility. And, I think it is as Yahweh requested. He says, you got to stop writing. He didn't say stop writing. I just want you to start talking to my people, which means you're going to be doing a lot less writing. What we're talking about right now, I've written within the last month. So it's not that stop translating and stop writing. That would kind of tear out my heart, I think, if I were to do that. It is that we only write now for the purpose of the Yahowah blog. And the difference is the written word doesn't get the attention of Israel. They just doesn't. Those who read about Hashem and G-D are too religious to pay any attention to Yahweh. And those who would consider themselves more secular Jews, which is our target audience, they're not much in readers of this material. They just don't know it. And so the only way you're going to get their attention is to be more confident than they are, to be bolder than they are, to just pound away at them. Day by day, word by word, to being more aggressive, forthright, committed than they are in their positions. Every day chipping away. It's like to be on Facebook is really quite pleasant. But to be on X is not. And so I finally had to come to this realization that we're going to have a small audience, but if we continue to get rid of all of the political and religious numbskulls, that audience is going to be of people that can make a difference.
Quality, yeah.
We're going to have a quality group of people, and I'm going to be even more aggressive in exposing the truth about politics and religion so that we hewn down the size of that group so that it's a much more focused group of people that can actually make a difference in this. And so I'm actually celebrating when we drop 20 people after 100 posts on X. So you have to change the attitude, and I think that's what God says. Well, it's just what Dode is writing, that Yada has this wherewithal now that he knows how to deal with the resentment and acrimony and the rebellion and defiance of Jews. Somebody writes me on X and said, "Why should I believe you over a theologian or a scholar?" I don't know. Said, I would, if I were you, if you want your soul to survive, I think I would listen to what I have to say. But if you're happy being religious, then you can buy religious books from any of those experts. But this is your call. It's not my call. I've done my job. You have to decide if you want to do yours. But don't ask me why you should do yours. But this is where we are. The job is to have such thick skin, to have such confidence in what you're doing, to know the importance of what you're doing, that you will experience genuine jubilation as a result of overcoming adversity, which is the requirement here. You have to be focused on overcoming the obstacles, the adversity, the challenges, because they're everywhere. They're literally everywhere.
There are two things I would have mentioned, though, that struck me. One of them is you never have asked for money. This is not about, everybody asks for money. You never ask for a dime. Just don't.
No, never taken any money.
Yeah.
I've spent $1 million pursuing this.
Yeah, I mean, it's costed you in, not at the end. And then,
I've devoted 110 hours of my time and spent $1 million.
And you've never asked
pursuing this.
Yeah. And the other thing is, you've never asked anybody to believe what you're saying. They say, "Go prove it." I can show you. I've got it. Here's your proof. You lay your proof all out there, and you even give us the tools to what you used in order to get to where you are. And
absolutely.
So I mean, that's why you don't have to. Nobody asks you to believe. Prove it to yourself.
Yeah. Even the books, they're if you want a paperback version of the books, they're royalty free.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if you want to read them online, they're entirely free online. Every word of them. I don't even ask you to sign in. I don't ask you for anything.
No.
You don't have to register.
You don't know who
nothing.
you are.
There they are. Read them.
Unheard of.
Yeah, unheard of. No one's ever done this. And it's not one book. It's 35 of them. And they're not
big
Dick and Jane Run. They're there's 700 to 825 pages each.
Yeah.
And they don't take a standard translation and say, well, let me explain this to you. The translations are completely innovative, written in a style that's never been used before. Expansive. And as you've said, they're not only more correct and complete, I give you the tools to challenge the veracity of them. Yeah. Here's the, Moria. Yeah. Here it is. Copy and paste it and put it into a search engine. And see if, in fact, it does not mean
or just look it up like I do.
Bitterness, hostility, resentment, acrimony. What Doe just said is, I've given him the knowledge and the capacity and the attitude that he needs to recognize and respond to bitterness and hostility and resentment and acrimony and overcome them and experience genuine jubilation as a result of overcoming these challenges. So that's unbelievably profound.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Prophetic, it's accurate, and I've given you all the tools to go and challenge it and say, well, is he telling the truth? But you got to have the want to, right?
Got to have the want to.
Yeah. I mean, the reason you guys are here is you have the want to.
I looked that up too.
Yeah, got to have the want to. And by the way, Leah, she's now here, but when she first stumbled on the first book, she said that she read for a week straight and didn't hardly sleep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, wow,
that was all. Yeah, that's all we ever did as well. We go to work and then come back and keep reading.
I read
reading for a year.
Yeah, Kevin, you read all the books several times through.
Yeah, I read at work. So yeah.
Don't tell your employer.
Well, because this is the greatest story ever told. And it's presented in a way that's never been offered to you this way before. It's all there for you to capitalize upon. And you have on the other end of this, the creator God of the universe that says, I want you. And open arms. Do as I have requested. And you can live with me forever. I mean, we're not writing about, going off on some grand expedition to nowhere. This is not, a fantasy novel. This is taking you directly to the creator God of the universe and to eternal life.
And the front page news.
Yeah, it should be. Well, the recognition that Dode is the Son of God, the Messiah, and the one who fulfilled Pesach as the Passover lamb in 33 CE, and that he wrote all about his experience, is the greatest discovery in human history. And yet, I've said it 1,000 times on X, and other than our group of supporters, there is no comment. Now, the second part of this, and this will end our program on this in our family 2 hours tonight. It says
it's
something.
A long hour. It's a long hour.
Yeah, he says he is largely alone and never influenced by others, while avoiding any association with the pledges and vows of those who are illegitimate and unauthorized. Now, this is multi-leveled. And largely alone is I am really isolated. And I think that when Rich here recently came and he spent a week twice with us, lived in the guest room downstairs. What he knows is that I get up in the morning, I do this job, and I go to bed at night. And he's only seen us interact with one friend. We have a family here that makes life on the island possible and enjoyable for us. And so there's one friend that we will hang around. But I gave up all friends. I gave up all hobbies. I've sold all of my my interests. This is all we do. And, you know, I had a lot of hobbies.
Yeah.
And I was retired with money. I had a yacht, and I'm a sea captain. I had many wonderful airplanes, and have the highest pilot rating you can have. All the scuba diving gear, and I'm a certified diver. I had some of the best experiences ever as a golfer. Was a scratch golfer for a while, and I had hobbies. I gave them all up. This is all I do. And Yahowah wants us to be somewhat isolated. And it's hard to be more isolated than I am on this. Kirk, you've been here with Sylvia.
Yes.
Yeah, we're pretty isolated on this little island, aren't we?
Uh-huh.
And so while we have wonderful support for this, not only from Yahowah and his prophets, but from the likes of you guys and others, this is largely alone. You know, at one point, Moshe said, you know, this is too much job. I can't do this job. Would you get me into? These people are impossible. They're Mora, and I just can't deal with them anymore, and I want out of this job. And Yahowah says, okay, make you feel better. I'll tell you what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to take the spirit that I gave to you, and I'm going to divide it between these 70 over here. And you see how that works out. Now you got helpers. And it was terrible. They didn't contribute anything. And the point of the story is 70 is not better than 1.
No.
So this is Yahowah's style. He picks a person, he communicates that person, and we are now at a time where we can't you can't do it individually. Like I have said so many times that if we're going to be effective, I've got to stick to my knitting. I have to do 2 things as well as I can do them. And those 2 things have to be to continue to study and translate Yahowah's testimony, derive insights from them, and then do this program. Mm-hmm. And everything else has to be done by others. And if we're not in that, but that's really that's where we are.
Yeah.
And so what I do alone, but I can't do it alone. And then it says, and so this is a pretty subtle concept here. And then it says, never influenced by others. You know, when I've translated Yahowah's testimony, came to my conclusions about it, I never, ever read what other people have concluded. Never, ever. I don't read anybody else's work. Never. It's totally independent. I am never influenced by others. And the thing that I have avoided is, after Prophet of Doom, I must have had 1,000 offers of people to partner with. And Yahowah said, don't do that. We're not partnering in this.
Yeah, I get it.
You know, some people are religious, they're political, they're conspiratorial, they all have their axe to grind. I don't want you partnering in this. We're in this together, but independent of all of those. Do not, it's just like his advice. I don't want you to act in the way of the Goyim nations.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't want us to partner with the religious, with the political, or with the conspiratorial, or with the patriotic, or with the militant. So that's what's being laid out here. And the next part of it is specific to what we just dealt with. Yahowah didn't ask me to encourage those who rebelled to come back. He says, no, they're illegitimate. They're unauthorized. I don't want you to have anything to do with them. You need to go forward with those who are legitimate and authorized, and they're not. So it is when you're working with YAHOWAH, there are lots of restrictions. There's lots of emancipation and openness and possibilities, but there are guidelines and rules. And one of the rules is that if somebody is going to misrepresent YAHOWAH's name or his character, like the Mother Goddess cult and the way that they've changed YAHOWAH's name, and they're going to rebel against YAHOWAH's designated spokesperson, you don't try to fix that.
Yeah.
You sever all association with it. And similarly, you don't try to, on X, if I went along with MAGA, and I'm a conservative, so why would I not want to go along with MAGA? I would have 100,000 followers as opposed to 1,200 followers. Maybe not quite this fast without advertising, but nonetheless, that's the kind of thing that's possible. But he says, don't do that. If you're going to be with YAHOWAH, you've got to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth all the time. And you cannot partner with those who are religious, political, conspiratorial, ever. So it's a narrow road to walk, to speak for him. And I'm comfortable with it, but you got to recognize. I think I had somebody write me. I haven't even responded to them yet on an email on the Craig at YADAYAH.com email, and said, why do you have so few people that believe your message? And my response is, why do I have so many? I'd have exactly the opposite. And God's made it really clear. We are going to have a lot.
Yeah.
A lot.
Yeah,
but
for sure we'll do that.
That a lot is going to take some doing. And we have a lot to behind me here that we can build our case on. And this YAHOWAH blog and the whole revamping of the website, all really terrific kinds of stuff that's going to make a tremendous difference. And I think the message that we're conveying on behalf of God is very compelling and timely. And the insights are profound. But it isn't about us. It's about those who are listening to be willing to open their minds to the most profound truth ever, to be willing to reject all of the lies that they have been told to believe. And so it's a lot to ask of somebody to be anti-religious, to be apolitical, to not be involved in any conspiracy. And then once you've shed all of that, to listen to a truth that is counter to everything you've ever been told, and yet is marvelous.
Yes.
So I have from the beginning come to the conclusion that the number and the quality of the people who listen has very little to do with me, and has everything to do with them. And so our job is to convey the message as completely, as accurately, as credibly, as passionately, as forthrightly as we can, as humanly possible, and to do the very best job we can in disseminating that message. But then it's the listener's responsibility as to what they're going to do with it. And we know in the end that Yah was pleased with the quality and even the quantity of people who respond to him on the Shabbat harvest, on the Towrah harvest, on the sacrifice of the red heifer, and at the homecoming on Kippurim. These events go well. He is pleased with the outcome of these events. And that means that collectively we prevail. But whether or not you are one of the beneficiaries, I can't do this job any better than I'm doing it. And so now the ball is in your court. You have to do your job better than you're doing it. if you're going to benefit. The onus is not on me. It is on you. Does that sound harsh, fellows, or
No,
does that resonate with you?
I looked up a little while ago today before the show. I looked up awa, or awa, and it means desire. It's a want to crave, to long for, to yearn for. If you ain't got the want tos, it ain't your fault.
Correct. Yep. The problem with Israel for 2,500 years is that no one had the want to. And most still don't have the want to. They don't want to buck tradition. And listen, I can understand it. If you live in Israel and you condemn the rabbis, as you must do, if you're going to be with Yahweh, you're against the rabbis. They're evil. You've got to speak out vociferously against Judaism. And even the secular Jews are raised in that culture. I mean, they have a complete misconception of Passover, Matzah, Bakodim, Shavuot, Towrah, and Kippurim, even Sukkah. They're completely misled on all seven. They have a complete misconception of the covenant. They have a complete misconception of Yahweh's name. They have a complete misconception of who Dod is and what he achieved. There's even the secular Jews who come up in that culture. And the moment they were to accept any of the things that we've come to know are true, they're going to be ostracized. And it's not going to be ostracized in a subtle way. Rabbis are vicious. And the political in Israel are vicious. And they will come after them. And so it is actually easier for me to say that rabbis are the single greatest threat to Israel, and that rabbinic Judaism is something that God despises more than even Christianity and Islam, and that no one who has ever trusted a rabbi has gone to heaven, and everyone who has performed in the role of a rabbi has gone to Sheol. One thing for me to say it, but to say it in Israel as a Jew, knowing how vicious they are in protecting their turf, it's tough. But think about the rewards. It is like everything in life, particularly with Yahweh. If you get into Shamayim by the skin of your teeth, okay, so you're there. But what if you're that one, that Israeli, that embraces this, that devours it, that is confident in it, that makes it his life's mission to teach this to other Israelis, and that one makes 2 and 2 make 4 and 4 make 8 and 8 make 16 and then it's 32 and it's 64 and 128 and there you go. And it's Israel alive with the truth about Yahweh. What if you're that guy? What if you're the one who takes on that risk, who overcomes those challenges, who's willing to do it for God and for their king? What do you think's going to happen when that person enters Shamayim, when Yahweh comes back?
Wow.
Oh, imagine having a party thrown for you by the creator God of the universe, Yahweh, who's saying, you're the one we were looking for, a Yehud that was willing to act like one. There's a lot of courageous Israelis, but they're fighting the wrong thing and fighting for the wrong thing. And eventually, there are going to be some that step up. And that is our position. We're going to continue to hammer away until there are those who step up in Israel. And within the more secular, non-overtly political Jewish community in the United States, there's as many, if not more, Jews in the United States than there are in Israel. And between the two, you have 85% of the Jews worldwide. So, and if you add Canada into the mix, and the UK, English-speaking countries, you have well over 90% of Jews worldwide. You got to know that right now it's almost impossible to be Jewish. This progressive Islamic alliance is tearing the world apart, calling for open hunting season on Jews. And it's getting worse, not better. And outside of the United States right now and Israel, it's tough to be a Jew. And it's going to be tougher and tougher in the United States. And when Israel is sacrificed in the two-state dissolution to save the reserve currency status of the petrodollar. And that's all that, it's the reason why Trump is there. That and the Saudis have money to keep Trump and his family and the lifestyle they want to live. And he covets that prize. But ultimately, Trump knows that because of his tariffs and what he's done most recently, the only hope to prolong the U.S. economy so it doesn't collapse during this term is to do a deal with Saudi Arabia. And when that happens, then Israel is very close to the position they were in during the Holocaust. Why did the Holocaust happen? Because Muslims and Nazis partnered together to kill Jews rather than exile them. And there was no place to exile Jews when the Muslims prevented it and convinced the Nazis to exterminate them instead. So what happens if Israel is narrowed at the waist and becomes nothing but a war zone? Then what happens to the other Jews because they have no place to go for protection?
Yeah.
Well, you do have a place to go.
Yeah.
His name is Yahowah. And that's why we're here. So, fellas, that was a good use of our family hour.
Yes, sir.
I'm pleased that we were able to share this much information. A lot of it was sobering. And I know it's tough for Israel to swallow. Why in the world these three graybeards are speaking to them about the God that they don't know? But the answers are pretty obvious. It's because you don't know the God we know. He is your God, but you don't know him. And that needs to change if you're going to survive. So happy Shabbat to one and all. We thank you for listening. We'll be back with you on another episode of Chakmah Choter tomorrow. And I did write this, but I just wanted to make it clear that I didn't do a YAHOWAH blog yesterday or the day before because it was essential to me to get way ahead of this series that we're doing on translations. Everything we're sharing with you now, I've translated and interpreted and analyzed in the last few weeks for this program. And I want to get further along in it before we got too deep into this program. And so it took 2 days really of 100% effort of translating and writing to put us in a position to do this. And I think I will try to limit the number of programs I do to 1 or 2 a day while I continue to flesh out this material. I know I need to start a series on Twistianity. I need to continue the series on Islam. I'd like to resume the series on Dod's Mizmor. So we have to still complete our series on, we've had even just the first half of Harvest. We're doing Shabuah, and we have all of Towrah yet to come. So we got a lot of material to cover. And, one of the challenges is that if we do what we did with the books, where we just continue to write. You can see these books behind me. There's 35 of them that are on the shelf at YAHOWAH.com. If we continue to do these blogs without giving some air between them, we're going to say somebody's going to come to one of the either Facebook or X or to YouTube and say, where do I begin?
Yeah.
Just too much here.
So keep up.
Yeah. So there is a reason for being a bit judicious. And what I'm capable of producing, and Leigh and I can do 3 of these a day. We've done as much as 6 hours in one day. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that's the right answer because I think we can do too much and overwhelm people. And so we need to be a bit more judicious in that regard. And so I may spend a little more time writing each day and a little more time posting, and cut down to 1 or 2 a day going forward, so that we don't overwhelm people, because that would be counterproductive. Anyway, thank you all for participating. Thank you for listening out there. Thank you for being part of the Covenant family. Thank you, Yahowah, for this opportunity to be of service. Thank you, Dode, for the opportunity to be part of your kingdom. And it is our honor and pleasure to say good night. Happy Shabbat to one and all. And thank you for listening to the YAHOWAH blog.